Guy here with a quick message before we get on with the pod. As a thank you to our most dedicated and loyal viewers and listeners to Blood Red, we're inviting you to join our Blood Red Club. By joining, you'll get access to insider transfer content, as well as interviews with former favourites and those connected at Anfield. All you need to do is head to bloodredpodcast.co.uk, enter your email address, and our exclusive content will head to your inbox. That's bloodredpodcast.co.uk. Thanks. Now on with the show.
Hello, I'm Paul Wheelock and welcome to the Academy Show on the Blood Red channel, where we focus on the talent bubbling away under Jurgen Klopp's first team squad. First and foremost, thank you very much for listening to and watching our podcasts over the summer. And for any of you that have already signed up to the Blood Red Club, if you haven't, please do check out www.bloodredpodcast.co.uk. And the good news is that club football is not too long away now. I think 6 weeks until that trip to Norwich City to kick off the Premier League season. And it's just 8 days away now, Matt Addison, who joins me, until Liverpool's players start pre-season training. Are you excited for that, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been one of those seasons, hasn't it, where we've had loads and loads of club football. There's been matches every few days, but you still miss it when it's not there, don't you? You have that break and you just want to see Liverpool come back, really. I mean, we've all enjoyed the Euros and all sorts of stuff like that. That's obviously still ongoing and all of that. The Copa America as well. Not that we've seen a huge amount of that given the kickoff times in this country, but yeah, there's nothing quite like club football, is there? There's nothing quite like Liverpool coming back and pre-season and all of that optimism, really, for the start of a new season where I think Liverpool definitely will be back up there and challenging, really.
Certainly will, I'm sure of that. And what I am sure of that is that we will see some of those first team players a week on Monday the 12th of July. That's when Jurgen Klopp's first team are scheduled to return to Kirby to begin pre-season training. But as you touched on there, Matt, we're going to have a lot of players away. Jordan Henderson, Xherdan Shaqiri, Thiago, Diogo Jota, Neco Williams, Harry Wilson and Andy Robertson, I imagine, will all be given time off after their involvement at the current Euro 2020 tournament. And the same applies to Addison, Fabinho and Roberto Firmino, who've been playing for Brazil at the Copa America. So I think that means there is every chance that Jurgen Klopp will fill out his squad with players from Liverpool's under-23 and under-18 teams. And that's the basis for today's Academy Show podcast, really. Which youngsters, I should say, should we be looking out for over pre-season? And Matt, you're going to split them into two sections for us. The kind of ones who are ready to step up, and maybe others who could feature in pre-season, but probably we won't be seeing maybe the best of them until maybe next summer. And we're going to start with a player who could yet be back up to Trent Alexander-Arnold and Joe Gomez at right back next season if Neco Williams leaves. Conor Bradley, Matt.
Yeah, a really interesting player, and I think it's a really sort of interesting situation for Liverpool. I think the backup right back slot is such a difficult one to fill, isn't it, for the club? Because basically whoever is in that role knows that they're not going to be as good as Trent Alexander-Arnold. They're probably never going to get to that level. So it's just a case of filling in for when he's injured or when he has a rest and stuff like that. So it's a really difficult thing to sort of balance. And I think Liverpool's plan, or certainly Liverpool's plan as things stand, is that if Neco Williams was to move on, he's obviously been the backup for the last couple of seasons. If he wants to go and be a regular at one of the Premier League clubs who is interested, Southampton, I think one of them, Brighton as well, one or two others, and he would be allowed to do that. But the suggestion is that Liverpool wouldn't then go out and buy another right back. It would be Conor Bradley who steps up. And I think it's an interesting one. I can kind of see the logic of it in that they don't want to spend a huge amount of their budget on a player that is going to be second fiddle to Trent. But yeah, it's one of those. Liverpool will know better than me. They know the player personally better than what I do. But I think he doesn't turn 18 until pretty much Liverpool return for pre-season. I think his birthday is Friday or Saturday of next week. I think that the 9th of July. So he turns 18 on that day. And that kind of just tells you everything really about where he's at in his career. He's a really good, really highly rated young player. But I think to sort of go into Liverpool and be the backup for Trent, let's say Trent, like last season, got an injury of, 5 or 6 weeks that he was missing for at one time. I think that's happened, a couple of times in his career. It wouldn't be a huge shock, I don't think, if Trent was injured for a period next season. To then have to rely on Conor Bradley to come in, I think that would slightly worry me a little bit. I mean, obviously, the other example would be that you could bring, obviously, Konate into the side, bring Joe Gomez into right back. But again, you're changing the way that you're playing. It's probably not ideal, I don't think. And I think we kind of saw it a little bit last summer in terms of the centre-back situation. Billy Camacho was talked up and kind of was one of those who was, I think, 17 at the time as well. He was kind of spoken about as being, you know, the Dan Lovren replacement. He could be the one that steps in, and we just didn't see him at all last season. He had a mixed season, in all honesty, for the under-23s, made a couple of high-profile mistakes and looked miles off it. So I think as much as Conor Bradley is a really talented young player, someone that I think long-term, you know, has a really good future in the game, I think it would slightly worry me if Liverpool didn't replace Neco Williams. If he does end up leaving, Liverpool have put that £10 million price tag on him. Who knows, you know, whether that will be hit or met or not. But yeah, it would slightly worry me. I think you'd be putting a lot of pressure on what is a very good young player. And I think it almost wouldn't be fair, to be honest. I think, you know, Conor Bradley is sort of 2 or 3 seasons away, similar to what Neco Williams was. I think he'll be a very good player, but is he ready for that yet? I'm not 100% sure that he is.
I suppose the club could argue there's the buffer of Joe Gomez as well. You know, he could always move over to right back and kind of take a play in the centre, and Mateusz back up, hopefully, by the start of pre-season. But that is an issue itself, isn't it? You know, we've got 3 centre-backs here in Van Dijk, Matip and Gomez coming back from injury. You know, you can't put too much pressure on them. Are you worried about this? I know you've kind of touched upon it there, but on the flip side, you can look back to last summer and Liverpool spent more than £10 million on Kostas Tsimikas, and he's hardly played, isn't it? It is a difficult one when you've got 2 fullbacks who are as good as Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson are.
Yeah, 100%. I think we probably would have seen a lot more of Kostas Tsimikas, to be honest, if, you know, Van Dijk and Matip and Gomez were all fit last season. And I think we will see a lot more of him going into this season. And I think that's something that probably Neco Williams would probably have to think about as well. I think there were times last season when Trent played when you probably wouldn't want him to have done that. I think there's certain games that you can afford to make these rotations for. And I think Neco Williams next season would see more football than what he's seen in the past. So I think that is something for him certainly to think about. Obviously, if you went to a Southampton or a team like that, probably he'd go in as first choice, and he's never ever going to play as much football at Liverpool as what he could elsewhere. But I think it's something to think about. I think in terms of the centre backs, yeah, who knows how Joe Gomez is going to come back. There is a history there of him kind of needing a bit of time to settle after a big injury. I'm sure, you know, that's why Konate and Matip and those players are still there. Liverpool have got 4 strong centre backs, but whether they're going to be ready to come in and play straight away, you know, who knows? Obviously, we know Matip's injury record. We know that Konate might need a bit of time to settle in. I think in terms of the right backs and the sort of knock-on effect there, I think that the bigger concern for me would be just that you don't really want to see Joe Gomez at right back. I think he's one of the best central defenders in the world. I think he's not particularly suited to playing at right back. And if you have Joe Gomez at right back, it completely changes the way that Liverpool play. So Conor Bradley is stylistically more similar to what Trent does. He can get forward, he can do that side of the game, but I think it's just slightly too early. I think that the ideal situation for me would be just for Neco to stay put really for at least another season, maybe 2 seasons, continue to develop, see where the land lies in terms of how much football he can get. And I think he might get a little bit more football than maybe what he's anticipating at the moment.
Move further up the field to midfield. Obviously, Gino Wijnaldum has left the club, and there's been links to players like Florian Neuhaus, Yves Bissouma, Ryan Gravenberch of Ajax, who you're going to do a podcast on for Blood Red Club members next Wednesday. If you sign up before Wednesday morning, that will be dropping into your inbox. John McGinn of Aston Villa. And what the Liverpool Echo is saying at the moment is that midfield is an area they're looking at, but they're not confirming or not 100% saying that, yes, Liverpool will sign a centre midfielder this summer, but it is an area they're looking at. And if that is the case, say if they go with what they've got, Liverpool at the moment, what chance for 2 players you told me to ask about here, Matt, you know, Leighton Clarkson and Jake Kane, you know, these players who will be a little bit more known to Liverpool supporters than Conor Bradley, because they have been on the fringes of things, they have played for the first team. What about these 2 guys? Do you think they're going to get a chance in pre-season?
100% they'll get a chance, I think, in pre-season. I think there's a pretty good chance that at least one, if not both of them, goes out and plays for a championship club, to be honest, next season. I've seen Leighton Clarkson being linked with Blackburn. I think that's the area where he grew up, which I think would make a little bit of sense for him to go and get minutes there. I think that would be interesting. I think, that kind of level of club to go and play senior football week in, week out, I think could be something that both of those players would look at and think could be an attractive move. Obviously, there's that debate, isn't there? Are they better to go and play as Harvey Elliott did for a season at Blackburn, or are they better to stay and train with Klopp and with Liverpool? I think it will kind of be up to the individuals themselves, I think, a little bit. I think I wouldn't expect Clarkson and Kane to play loads of minutes in terms of the Premier League or the Champions League. But I think, if there was the odd League Cup game, possibly the FA Cup later on in the season, I think you could certainly see them coming in and doing a little bit here and there. But whether that is enough for them, I don't know. Certainly in pre-season, I think we'll see a fair bit of them. Obviously, Gini Wijnaldum's gone. The first choice three of Thiago Henderson and Fabinho, they're not going to be back straight away. You wonder, Keita, Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think it's a big pre-season for both of those players. Marko Grujic, will he still be there or not? I think there's a few question marks there. There's certainly places up for grabs, and of the midfield options, I think Clarkson and Kane certainly are the two, I think, to certainly look at in that position.
Clarkson is an interesting one because he is from that part of the world, Blackburn, and I do wonder if for Blackburn Rovers, the success of Elliott and the fact that they played him so much will probably stand them in good stead when it comes to loan deals with Liverpool, because I know Blackburn is a club I used to cover at the moment. They're not struggling financially, but I don't think they're going to have loads of money to spend this summer. And if Clarkson goes there, again, they've had the success of Harvey Elliott. I don't even know if we can count him as a young player anymore, Matt, because he's played a full season in the Championship and starred, but he's still very young himself in his age. Surely this summer he's left behind the academy now at Liverpool, isn't he? When he features this summer in pre-season, he's surely going to feature as a first-team player, would you say?
Yeah, I think that there is a kind of decision to be made in terms of whether he goes out and has a Premier League loan this season. For me personally, it's a pretty obvious decision that you keep him, you play him, you do all of the sort of things that we thought probably would have happened last season. Last season, obviously, I think that the move to Blackburn took place in October. Obviously, the window will close slightly sooner this season with the logistics of the kind of transfer window and stuff like that. But I think Liverpool, if they do let him go out on loan, they'll leave it as long as they possibly can. I'm not quite sure when the first League Cup games are and how that will sort of align, but certainly there will be opportunities for Harvey Elliott, certainly in pre-season, but I would imagine he's the one out of all of these players, as you say, the one that has proven that he can do it consistently across a senior season. Last season, I think the opportunity will be there for him. You look at, obviously we're looking quite far ahead into the season in terms of January and AFCON and things like that. There is going to be a couple of spots. I know it's only 2 games, possibly an FA Cup game in there as well. I think it's Brentford and Crystal Palace that Mohamed Salah and Sadio Mane could well miss. You just sort of think that there will be chances, not just that, but the last 20 minutes of a game, if Liverpool are 2 or 3 goals up, for example, could you bring on Harvey Elliott for Mohamed Salah? Could you freshen things up like that? I think, at this point in time, 12 months on, having seen what he's done last season, I don't think there's really a question to be asked there. I think it's definitely a case that he could do that. And I think for him as well, I think last season, it kind of could have gone either way. He could have gone out on loan. He could have stayed. I think this season, I think he will feel as a player a little bit more confident, a little bit more of a senior player at Liverpool. I think, certainly Pep Lijnders has spoken about missing him in training and things like that. I think for most of the people at Liverpool, it's a fairly obvious decision really to keep him about next season, because, as I say, there will be chances, even if Liverpool get in another attacking player, which is a possibility. I think, certainly with a switch to a 4-2-3-1 or, playing him off the bench, giving him little minutes here and there, there's not really a question mark over him. He's very much, capable of coming in and doing that, I think.
I think it's a really interesting point that you made there, that they may wait till very late on in the window to decide what happens with Harvey Elliott. Because I imagine, do you think, Matt, his future's almost tied up with those of, say, Harry Wilson, Xherdan Shaqiri, Divock Origi, even Takumi Minamino? Like, if the majority of 2 or 3 of those goes, it pushes Harvey up the higher up the order.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's already ahead of someone like Harry Wilson, to be honest. I think it's just a case of, you've only got so many numbers, and if you're paying Divock Origi, whatever he's on each week to sit on the bench, would you want to keep him involved? And maybe does he block the path for someone like Elliott? I think possibly he would. I think in an ideal world, Liverpool would move on 3 or 4 of those fringe players, promote Harvey Elliott to being one of those, and obviously in future we think he'll be a lot more of that. But I think, going into next season, there's no real question mark for me over someone like a Harry Wilson, or even an Origi or a Shaqiri. If you had to choose an option to come off the bench, I think I'd probably pick Harvey Elliott over all of them anyway, to be honest. So I think it does sort of increase that pressing need for Liverpool to get rid of 1 or 2 fringe players, just to open up that path. And we've seen even Phil Foden say at Manchester City, he's had to be patient, but I think even he now is 2021, I think, Phil Foden, and he's been patient. He's getting the rewards now, and I can see a similar sort of path for Harvey Elliott. I think even if over the next 2 seasons he just played the role of the fringe player, the wild card that maybe comes off the bench, lets 1 or 2 players rotate, I think that would be enough for him, with the training, with Jurgen Klopp being there, Pep Lijnders, copying Mohamed Salah, maybe taking bits of Roberto Firmino's game in training. I think there's a certain pathway there for him to be able to take, and he doesn't have to come in and replace Mohamed Salah next season. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but I think there's enough there to sort of think that he can really establish himself as a kind of fringe player, at the very least, going into next season.
Yeah, if no one's seen his goals and assists for Blackburn last season, do check him out on YouTube. It does underline what a special talent Harvey Elliott is going to be, if he isn't already. We touched on Harvey Elliott there, Matt. We touched on Leighton Clarkson and Jake Kane and Conor Bradley, these kind of players who we think will probably get more game time in the summer for a variety of different reasons. Let's now move on to a group of players who may well feature in some of the friendlies, which at the time of recording on Friday afternoon have yet to be released, but probably are not ready for the first team just yet. And let's start with a player. We've got a list of players to go through here, but let's start with one who you mentioned at the top of the podcast, because last summer, a lot of people were getting excited about him in terms of being that Dejan Lovren replacement and being the 4th centre-back. Billy Camacho, what's happened to Billy the Kid? I think Jurgen called him, didn't he, last summer? What's happened to him? Because we were all thinking of great things, weren't we, 12 months ago?
Yeah, he's a really interesting player. I think he's one that is physically a lot more developed than what you might imagine at a very young age, 16, 17, 18 as he is now. I think, he was one of those that was kind of fast-tracked a little bit above his ability level. I think they kind of saw him as, a player certainly in that position as well, where you need to be a little bit more physical, you need to be good in the air, all of those sorts of things that you kind of need to succeed in English football. He kind of had those ahead of his peers, really. I think the big thing for him, and we spoke about this, a year or so ago when he was coming through, was that he just wasn't quite there in terms of the maturity of his game and that sort of thing. And I think we kind of saw that as the season progressed. We all know, the troubles that Liverpool had at centre-back. Even then, it wasn't really a genuine option to throw him into a game or anything like that. And I think the first game that he played last season for the under-23s kind of proved that. And he lost concentration on the edge of the box. Someone nicked the ball off him and it ended up in a goal. And I think it's just kind of taking the basic sort of things that he's got, which are really good, the speed, the sort of strength, the power, all of that sort of thing. He's got the kind of building blocks, but I think there's still a long way to go for him really to be considered a genuine option at first team level. I think it was kind of premature to sort of think that was going to be the case last season. I think Liverpool were kind of hoping that Van Dijk wouldn't get injured. Obviously, there was no real precedent of that happening before. They obviously knew that Joel Matip and Joe Gomez are susceptible now and again to these sorts of things. But, maybe if Van Dijk and Camacho were to line up alongside each other for a League Cup game or something like that, maybe you could get away with it. But I think, he's had an okay season, not anything particularly spectacular. And I think, going into next season, I think he would be one for me, which I wouldn't even think about putting out on loan, I don't think. I think I would just keep him in the under-23s, get him to get up to speed with them, continue to develop, grow his leadership, grow his concentration, become a little bit more comfortable on the ball as well. I think that's, hugely important for him. as I say, he's got the building blocks, but I just think he's 2 or 3 steps away from really being a genuine first-team option, I think, for Liverpool.
Billy Camacho's stars waned a little bit over the last 12 months, but as you rightly say there, Matt, there's still loads of time for him to develop. One player's profile who has shot up over certainly the last couple of months of the season, when you can see the LFC TV clips that were going up on social. Matias Musilovsky, if hopefully I pronounced that right. Real talent. You look at the goals he's been scoring, he's clearly got that in his locker, but is he ready? Do you think he might be someone we see in the first team over the summer, or are we kind of putting maybe a bit too much pressure on him to develop so fastly?
I think we forget actually with him that he only came in last summer. He moved obviously countries and had to settle into Liverpool. I know, as soon as they were allowed to this summer, he went back to Poland, went to stay with his family and stuff like that. And who can blame him after such a long time away at such a young age? But I think it's a testament to him that he's managed to put down these numbers. 12 goals, 3 assists in 25 games in his first season for Liverpool, as I say, in a completely new country, staying with a host family that he'd never met before. Things like this, we kind of forget, and I think it does sort of show a level of maturity, I'd say, about his game, and the way that he has come on since he came into Liverpool is really, really impressive. I mean, he started the last season playing almost as a false 9 through the middle, played a little bit wide as well, but he was sort of getting 20, 25 minutes off the bench, and it was only the second half of the season really where he became an absolute nailed-on starter. And we saw in the last international break, he impressed Jurgen Klopp and his coaching staff during that intra-squad friendly. There was him and plenty of others on this list that played in that. And I think that's what we'll see in pre-season. I think there's a good chance that he'll train with the first team. I think there's a good chance that several of these youngsters will step up and do that. But I think another year or so, maybe then he goes out on loan. Maybe the year after that, he'd be interesting for Liverpool to look at as a possible option for the first team. I'd be surprised if he gets anywhere near the senior team going into this season, but I'd also be very surprised if we didn't see him at some point in pre-season, at the very least in the training pictures, but certainly probably in one or two of the games as well. It's a difficult balance because it's such a short pre-season this season. Liverpool have got less than 5 weeks to prepare for that first fixture of the campaign, but I think there will be opportunities for these players, and Mateusz is one that stepped up to train with the first team plenty of times and not really looked out of place, or not really been too nervous or not confident enough to do that. So I think it's certainly one to watch in pre-season for me, definitely.
Another player who impressed in that inter-squad friendly was a signing, Kai Gordon, and he's different to a number of these players we're talking about currently, about who could feature in pre-season, but probably they're not really ready yet. And this player, Kai Gordon, he's actually has experience in the Championship. So how's he settled into Liverpool since that move from Derby County?
He's settled in brilliantly. I've been really impressed with him every time I've seen him, and I think we'd be talking about him a lot more if he hadn't have been cup tied for the FA Youth Cup run. Liverpool obviously got to the final in that. There was a few players in there, Musialowski being one of them, whose profile really shot up as a result of that. But he'd played about 2 or 3 weeks before he signed for Liverpool for Derby's under-18s in the FA Youth Cup. I think they got knocked out, but it was the case that he was then cup tied and couldn't play for Liverpool. But in the matches that he did play, he did really well. I think he ends the season with 9 goals, 3 assists in 13 games in the under-18s Premier League, which for a player who's not 17 until October, just really underlines the quality that he's got. And I think he's one of those that he will start next season, I think, with the under-18s, obviously just because of the age that he is. But I think it's not going to be long until he moves up and plays more regularly for the under-23s. I think he'll be one that, not just in pre-season, but into the season proper as well, will probably be there or thereabouts for sort of Liverpool training on a regular basis. And as you say, he's played in the Championship physically. He's very much there. Liverpool have put down, obviously, I think $1 million up front, could rise to 3 million. Wayne Rooney and Derby absolutely loved him, and I think you can really see why. He's quick, he's really good on the ball, he's got the end product. And I think the biggest thing really with him, at the age of 16, if you give him the ball in that final third, he just makes the right decision on a consistent basis every single time. That he's going to deliver some sort of quality, play someone else in, get a shot on target. He knows, what to do at the right time. So, yeah, certainly, again, one to watch. Similar to Musialowski, I think we'll see him a little bit in pre-season. I'd be surprised if we saw him for the first team anytime soon. But, yeah, he's one of those. The biggest compliment, similar to Harvey Elliott, actually, is that you just look at him and you just never guess that he was as young as what he is.
Good, the attackers there in Gordon and Musialowski, and the defender in Billy Camacho. Let's go to midfield now. Two players here I want to talk about is Tyler Morton and James Balagizi. Like Musialowski and Gordon, they had some really impressive figures last season, didn't they, in terms of goals and assists?
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler Morton is one that I seem to talk about a lot on this podcast. He's a player that I just love to watch him. He's that kind of silky, skillful player, but again, gets those numbers. And I don't think we can underestimate really the importance of getting the goals, getting the assists. You don't just have to look good as a footballer, you've got to deliver. And that is, exactly what he's doing. He's sort of across 25 games in all competitions between the under-18s and the under-23s. Last season, he gets into double figures for goals, 10 of those, another 7 assists as well, which I think for a player who kind of plays as a box-to-box player is, really, really good numbers, whichever age group or whichever games that you're playing in. I think if you can produce those sorts of numbers, it really is an interesting one. And I think, again, he's one to really watch in terms of pre-season. I'd be surprised if, this season was one where he went out on loan or played for Liverpool's first team. I think it will be a case of very much he will be an under-23s player from now on. He'll be in that team. He'll be a regular and probably one of their leaders this season. But I think he's certainly one to watch in pre-season, particularly if one of or both of Clarkson and Kane were to go out on loan. I think he would then be the one that would step up and take on those minutes. Who knows, maybe we might see him next season on a Champions League bench or something like that. So I think he's certainly one to watch. And obviously, as you say as well, James Balagizi, the other one, similar sort of position, attacking player, didn't quite get the same numbers last season. 3 goals, 10 assists it was for him, but he did spend, I think, a couple of months out injured, really impressed and came back really strongly after that. The second half of the season, much, much better than the first for him. So again, it's one of those where can he establish himself as an under-23s player? I think, for me, Tyler Morton is slightly ahead of him at this moment in time, but we know at youth level, those things can change very, very quickly. And I'd be surprised if we didn't see a little bit of him at some point in pre-season for Liverpool's first team.
So the goalkeeper position, obviously Adrian signed a new contract, so he's sticking around, but Caoimhin Kelleher, we believe will be the number 2 this season to Addison, but there will be no Addison for at least for the first 2 weeks, I imagine, of pre-season, because he is currently competing in the Copa America with Brazil, with Fabinho and Firmino. So which academy goalkeeper is going to step up, Matt, for the pre-season, the initial pre-season training, the initial pre-season games?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Harvey Davis has been training with Liverpool's first team for a while. He's been there, whenever there's been an injury, whether it's, being Kelleher for the last couple of weeks of the season, Alisson before that, it was always, Harvey Davis that would step up and be the one to make that trio. It's always a 3 which work with John Atterberg. So Adrian, Kelleher and Alisson on a regular basis. But I think, if any one of those players isn't there, it tends to be Harvey Davis that steps up. He is the kind of most senior and seemingly the one who's sort of in the lead in terms of the group of academy goalkeepers who does that and seems to be doing really well. He's one that we've seen pretty regularly throughout the season, to be honest, given the injuries that Liverpool have had in terms of stepping up to training and things like that. We've seen a fair bit of him. So I think he would be the favourite. Marcelo Pitaluga is the one that I would sort of keep an eye on long term in terms of the goalkeepers. I think he is by far and away the most promising of those players, but I think he's still only 17 or 18, the young Brazilian goalkeeper. He's trained with Alisson before. He's trained with Alisson's brother, I think, over in Brazil. That's how Liverpool picked up on him when they first signed him. But yeah, he is a possibility for pre-season, but I think Harvey Davis would be the more likely, but it wouldn't massively surprise me if we maybe saw Pitaluga there as well. Maybe not in games or anything like that, because Alisson and Kelleher, the priority will always be those two in terms of preparing them for the season. But I think Pitaluga certainly is one to look out for in training, and certainly long term. Liverpool have huge hope for what he could become, and hopefully one day could be, you know, a competitor for his fellow countrymen at first team level. But yeah, still very, very young, especially for a goalkeeper. So plenty of time to develop. I think this summer we could start to see a little bit more of him. And I'm sure in future summers he'll absolutely be there.
Definitely. A lot of players to keep an eye out there for over the course of these next 5 or 6 weeks before that first Premier League game of the campaign away at Norwich City on August the 14th. But there are some academy players who will not be featuring in these pre-season friendlies, because there's been a bit of transfer news, hasn't there, since we've last done an academy show. 4 players either have gone or are going. And we'll start with Sepp van den Berg. Probably not surprising one. Theo Squires did a podcast with him at the back end of last season, and I think he admitted on that he was looking to go back on loan to Preston, and that's duly happened.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think obviously when he went there last season on loan, there was a clause inserted into that Preston would then have first refusal essentially on having him on loan again for this season. And I think it's a move which has kind of worked really well for him. He's a centre-back by trade, but he's been playing at right-back for Preston. And from what I believe, I don't know a huge amount about Preston and their transfer dealings, but I believe that they've maybe lost 1 or 2 centre-halves. Obviously, Ben Davies is one of those that went in January. I think they've maybe lost 1 or 2 others. They kind of see next season as an opportunity to play him at centre-back, which would be obviously his preferred position, the position that he could really settle in and establish himself in. So, yeah, so far so good for him at Preston. Hopefully he can kick on and do similar sort of things next season. But again, like most of these young players, it's just a case of, can he get on the pitch? Can he show that he can do it consistently? Is he mature enough to play in a league like the Championship? I think those questions have already started to be answered, but I think if he can have, you know, a really impressive season this season, then maybe, you know, this time, you know, in 12 months, maybe we're looking at him as a possible option for Liverpool. But yeah, he's going to have to impress at Preston. But I think the early signs are good. Certainly what we saw from him last season is that he's got the capability of doing that. And it's going to be an interesting one to see if he can make that next step, because, you know, there is a really good central defender in there. Whether he's quite Liverpool's level, I don't know. But certainly this season will go a long way to sort of determining what his next move is, whether that's at Liverpool, whether that's somewhere else, Premier League, Championship. I think it's going to be a really interesting one to watch.
This next name, who's leaving the club, it really does show you that time flies. It doesn't feel like 2 years ago now. I remember him in Preston in pre-season, and he was on the end of a horrible tackle, if I remember rightly, in a game in America against Sevilla. Yasser Larouci, he's out of contract now. I think his contract ran out a couple of days ago. He's leaving the club, isn't he, Matt? We won't be seeing Yasser Larouci, when at the time a lot of people had high hopes that he could potentially become the backup to Andy Robertson.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those that I always thought would probably end up moving on. I don't think he was quite at the level. I think he did impress in terms of his attacking play in pre-season, but maybe wasn't particularly tested defensively. And I think that's where Liverpool will have their reservations about him. He was offered a new contract. Obviously, Liverpool need players to play for their under-23s. They don't have a huge number of left-backs coming through. There's 1 or 2, but they probably, you know, could have kept him, could have given him minutes. But yeah, he didn't play a huge amount last season. He'll be 21 in January. So I think it's the right time for him to go and move on. As I say, Liverpool did offer him a new contract, but I think he's kind of sort of seeing, you know, the way forward for him is to go and get regular senior minutes elsewhere, because similar to the situation really with Neco Williams, obviously he's nowhere near that level. He's not progressed to being Robertson's backup or anything like that. But to get minutes, you're going to have to get past, obviously, Tsimikas first and then Andy Robertson. It just seems highly unlikely, I think, in terms of next season. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he goes. I know Norwich have been linked with him in the past. Are they still interested? I'm not too sure. I think Leeds United, when they were in the Championship, were interested, but certainly I think they will have moved past him, being linked with 1 or 2 other decent left-backs at the moment at Leeds. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see where he goes. I think maybe a Championship club would maybe pick him up. Maybe he might go back to France. I don't know. But I think there's certainly senior football somewhere for him. It's not at the top end of the Premier League, I don't think. And that is obviously the level that Liverpool are at this moment.
Another player who was offered a contract, another left-back, I believe, certainly a defender, who decided to head to pastures new is Rhys Savage. And I know this one, I read his Instagram post after he left. You know, he'd been at the club, I think, 13 years. I think he signed as an under-9, but he'd been training with the club before that. But Remy Savage decided to go to Newcastle United, Matt.
Yeah, I really like Remy Savage. I think he was, a really solid option for Liverpool's youth teams last season. But again, it's just the number of players that are ahead of him in the pecking order. He was nowhere near really in contention for playing at all for the senior team last season. I don't think he's been one to step up to first team training or anything like that. And I think it would have been a difficult decision for him to move away from Liverpool. As you say, he's been there such a long time. But I think at 19 now, it was the time to pick a new club, go and try and get senior football there. And he's gone to Newcastle, so it's maybe not the easiest way to get into a Premier League team. I think maybe if he'd have gone to a Championship club, you could kind of see that pathway being a little bit more simple and straightforward. But yeah, best of luck to him. I know from seeing the messages on Instagram and Twitter and various things from his teammates, really well loved, will be absolutely missed at Liverpool. I know, Barry Lutus and various other members of Liverpool's academy coaching team were really impressed with what he did. Really did come on, I think, a fair bit last season. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, not quite good enough for Liverpool at this moment in time, but certainly one to watch. And I'm sure, whether it's at Newcastle, whether it's somewhere else further down the line, he's going to be a top professional footballer somewhere in the footballing pyramid. And yeah, best of luck to him. Yeah,
best of luck, Remy, and best of luck to this final player. We've left him to last because he's actually left the club today to go to Basel in Switzerland, and it's a good fee as well, Matt, isn't it, for Liverpool? Liam Miller, the Canada international striker.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little while before this one gets confirmed, just because of medicals and COVID playing into all of that sort of thing, making it slightly more difficult. But yeah, 1.5 million euros, so about 1.3 million pounds is the fee, which for a player who's played once for Liverpool, which was, I think, February 2020 in the FA Cup against Shrewsbury Town, I think that's a really good fee to pick up for someone like that. So yeah, it's a really good move for him. Again, he's one of those that I think, is a real talented player. Went to Charlton and did some decent things last season. Showed a little bit of inconsistency, I think it's fair to say. But if he can find that, there is a really good, really solid player in there. And I think that's kind of represented in the fee. Obviously, a Canadian international. He's been there and done it for a couple of different senior teams out on loan, Kilmarnock, then Charlton. I think it was the right time for him to move. It's the right time for Liverpool to cash in on him. But yeah, 1.3 million. I really don't think Liverpool can complain too much at that. And it's going to be one to watch out for. I think Basel is a really good move for him, as I say, and it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. I think Liverpool have got a 20% sell-on fee as well. So if he does do well, that 1.3 million could even be added to in the future.
Most definitely. I think we've got gone through a lot there, Matt. Thanks very much for your time, mate. And hopefully some of these players that we've been talking about catch our eye in pre-season when it gets underway in the next couple of weeks. We will be back with another academy show in the coming weeks where we'll probably preview the under-18, under-23 season. But for now, keep on listening to the podcast. Keep on watching the podcast. The support is really appreciated. Bye-bye for now.